are at the Anne of Cleves house in Lewes. Should we go and find Owen?
Let's go.
Hello!
Hi.
Come on in.
Thank you.
So Owen, where are we standing right now?
So we are standing in the hall, the central hall of Anne of Cleves house.
Yes.
And this dates to the 15th century. So the oldest part of the house as it stands today. Beneath us are actually 13th century cellars because there was another house here.
Incredible.
So this is very much tied to Lewes Priory.
Yes.
And essentially what Anne of Cleves house was built for was to house the many, many pilgrims that came to visit Lewes Priory, which was one of the wealthiest and most visited priories in the southeast. So this was a bustling hive of activity, and you can imagine that the central hall was the heart of that hive, as it were.
I just love these high ceilings. It's such an impressive scale as you come in, isn't it?
It really is, and it also helps us to understand exactly what a wheeled house is.
Yes.
It's quite different from other formats of houses of this time, which tend to be in a U shape. So we're in the same part of the country as Hever Castle.
We are.
Another Anne of Cleves property.
Yes.
And as you know, this is a very fertile oak growing industry.
Yes. We'll see more of that when we look at the beams, won't we, upstairs, because there's some incredible examples of Wealden oak beams.
There really, really, really is. And essentially, because of the clay in the Weald, oak trees could grow much, much taller than in other parts of the country.
Absolutely.
And that enabled houses to be much longer, not in that sort of U-shaped format, but rather in an elongated stance, which allowed for this sort of double height hall in the middle.
Totally.
We do have an upstairs, which we're going to be visiting very shortly. But yeah, I love this space. I think it tells us so much about the area.
Yes.
And the grandeur of this space. This is very much functioning when Anne of Cleves takes purchase of the property, or was gifted it by the king as a communal living space. But it does evolve, as we will see later in the video, into a private property.
Absolutely. And as you said, this is the earliest part of the existing structure. This is the 15th century, and there is a wing that's added on later, isn't there, which we're going to explore as well. But this is the original sort of heart of the home.
It really is, and a nice warm welcome too.
Absolutely.
Tell us about this amazing space where we are now.
So this is just one of the most impressive spaces in this house, I think. The sheer scale of it just hits you as you walk in. And that's largely thanks to the wooden beams that Owen was mentioning downstairs in the hall. You can really see those Wealden beams in full flow here. These kind of wide sweeping beams are from those giant trees that grew in the Wealden Forest area that covered Kent and Sussex and some other counties as well. And they grew in that clay foundation and grew very tall. So we get these wonderful sort of open spaces. But this space, it looks rather open now. It would have been sectioned off into smaller spaces. So this is again part of the 15th century house, but this would have been about 3 bedrooms. There would have been one kind of in front of us here, and another one behind us where there's still a bit of a partition. So it would have been, it looks very open to us now, but it would have been sort of smaller and a bit more cramped in feeling. Let's have a look at this bed, because this would have obviously been sort of the main room of these 3 bedrooms
Yeah.
that would have been in this apartment. But there wouldn't have just been one person sleeping here. There
No.
would have been multiple people sleeping in the same bed, in the same space. It was very much about communal living in the medieval period. So there's not that kind of privacy that we see coming into play in the Tudor era in Anne of Cleves' time, where she would have had her own bedroom. This is very much more about everyone sleeping in together, perhaps with a stranger next to you.
Yeah, I know. I mean, this, I don't know about you. I'm used to my nice super king size bed now. The idea of sharing with multiple people when I may not even know who they are,
Absolutely.
not appealing, but
And
it's pretty much the norm, isn't it?
It is the norm, and specifically for this space, they would have been pilgrims who were visiting the nearby priory. And so they would have all been, again, probably strangers to each other, just kind of shoved into the same spaces. But it's, of course, their sort of funds that are going into Anne of Cleves' pocket when she has the kind of tenure of this space and takes the funds from the property and surrounding property. So it's these kind of people who were sleeping together, packed in, who eventually would have been paid into Anne's pocket.
Yeah. And I mean, with these beds, this one is a perfect kind of example that tells us several things about the way in which people did sleep in that time.
Definitely.
And I mean, I don't know where to start. Should we start with something that's actually not on display, which would have been the lattice work strings underneath?
Yes, because there's a funny saying, isn't there, that goes to that we recognise today.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, which is good night, sleep tight.
Yes.
And that all comes from the fact that you were expected to pull the lattice work very tightly underneath.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So that you were more comfortable and didn't sort of slip through.
Yeah, exactly. But you wouldn't even have slept lying down, would you?
No, you wouldn't. And that's why beds are often sort of shorter than you'd expect. And we get that comment a lot at Heath, for example, with our beds there. People are always confused. Were people really just that short? And of course, some of them were smaller than we are today. But people used to sleep propped up, almost sitting up, because they're so superstitious. The only time you were sort of laid flat was when you were in your coffin, really. So you wanted to be propped up. And there's a lovely tester as well, isn't there, above us?
Yeah, no, I love that. And I've heard various different theories as to the reasons behind these testers.
Yes, yes.
You obviously have as well. And one of them was the fact that, it's a bit grim really, but the fact that, you know, you didn't want vermin and rats and things falling on top of you whilst you're sleeping. Pretty creepy, isn't it?
It is, but practical, isn't it? If you think about it, you don't really want to be sleeping and something's falling from the beams onto your face and waking you up. You want that protection as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Amazing, the fact that this piece of furniture is one that looks really impressive.
Absolutely.
But that also serves a really practical purpose too.
Lots of practical purposes, yeah. It's really functional, but probably doesn't help much even if you are sleeping next to a stranger.
Should we go and have a look at the other room?
Let's have a look at the other room. So this is going to be the 3rd bedroom in the apartment. Let's
have
go
a look.
So this is the 3rd bedroom in this kind of upstairs apartment, but it's still very much a part of the 15th century house. And I guess it would have been a high status bedroom as well, which you can sort of see nodded to by this lovely oak headboard from the 16th century.
Yeah.
But there is an obvious reminder, I think, that this space was from the 15th century, and it sort of is around here, isn't it?
Yeah,
Nicola?
that's the nice little clue. So
Yes.
originally, the floor would actually have been at this level.
It would have been.
So it's changed a lot, as you can see. We're now
has.
right down here. And the reason for that is very much a reminder of this house's coaching in past.
Yes.
Because originally below us, this would have been the parking space, if
It
you
would have
like,
been.
for the carriages and the horses and carts that were coming in here. So this is very much, as I say, a reminder of the fact that this served a practical purpose as well. This was very much considered to be practically an inn and a place when people would be able to come and rest overnight.
Totally. And this is a lovely reminder, I think, of how much this space has evolved across the centuries.
Definitely.
And this is one of those additions in later centuries, this lovely 16th century chimney breast.
Yeah.
And this would have been to obviously heat the bedrooms, but of course there's no kind of open fireplace here because it would have got far too smoky.
Yeah.
And instead there would have been a fire underneath that would have heated the bricks, and after the fire had gone out it would have still radiated that heat, kept the heat and sort of spread it around the room, so you would have been nice and warm and snug when you were cozied up next to the strangers in the beds together, those pilgrims.
I love the fact that everything here has functionality at its heart.
It
So
does.
it's not all about looking good. Everything here is here for a reason.
It is. It absolutely is. And when we're thinking of Anne of Cleves, this isn't, you know, a bedchamber for a queen. This isn't a bedchamber that she necessarily would have been used to in her other properties, but it's the bedchamber for those who were essentially, whose funds were paying for her lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly that. So we see that in her accounts, don't we? The sort of lifestyle that she was leading, all of that is being funded by people who are paying to come and use this space.
Absolutely. Now, before we go meet Owen in the parlour, I just want to tell you a little bit about this bell, which hangs over this doorway. This wasn't always here. This is a later movement to this building, but it once would have stood in the church, in the local church. And its function was, if this house, heaven forbid, were to catch fire, someone would run to the church, ring this bell to raise the alarm for the neighbours, and then they'd quickly pass out grappling hooks. And those hooks would have been used to come back here and actually pull down sections of the walls and the buildings to stop them from catching fire, and so spreading it to other neighbours.
Wow, what an incredible piece of history right there.
It's pretty amazing, and it's lovely to have it here in the house now. Thankfully, it never caught fire.
Oh, good to know.
Let's go to the parlour.
So Owen, we're now here in the parlour, and the name parlour comes from the French parler, to speak. So tell us more about this fantastic space.
It's glorious, isn't it? I mean, this really tells you the difference, I think, between the 15th and the 16th century house.
Yeah.
And this, of course, is the additional wing that is built on in the 16th century. So this would have been added during Anne of Cleves' time, and then really lived in by the Saxby family, who took freehold of the property after Anne of Cleves' death. And this really tells us, I think, about the difference between that communal sleeping, that communal living that we had seen, to the desire during the Tudor era for much more privacy. And this is really high status. It tells you that this house, although perhaps not fit for a queen, was absolutely, top class. We can see how many windows this space has. It's very light, isn't it?
Yeah, very expensive. Lots of glass.
Absolutely. And you can imagine the women of the household in here talking, doing their clean work, their embroidery, their black work. And this was Saxby's way of really telling his visitors that he was a man of money, that his women didn't need to work farming or doing other jobs like that they could have a bit more leisure time.
Love that.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is about status, and it's also about the modern world. And I mentioned the windows. Something very unusual about this space is the fact that this window isn't visible to the street, as it were.
No.
So that really tells us that this is more than conspicuous consumption. This is not just about showing off how much glass you could afford. This is about comfort. This is about getting the best daylight in so that the occupants can do their work. They can do their black work in comfort without straining their eyes. So I love this space. I think it really tells us a lot about the development of the Tudor house.
And very much also that the Saxbys were people who had money, who wanted to impress and wanted the world to know about it.
Very much so. This, they're making their mark, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And what better way to do it than with a nice showy window?
Absolutely.
Where to next?
Well, I'm feeling rather peckish, so why don't we go and see what's cooking in the kitchens?
Let's go.
So, Owen, I hear you're rather hungry. Well, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the 16th century kitchen here. And we're now underneath where you and Nicola were just having a parley up in the parlour. This is the fitted kitchen added in the 16th century, unusually attached to the other wing of the house.
Yeah.
Because, of course, kitchens used to be separate buildings, didn't they? But we see this trend moving in the 16th century to have them attached to other buildings.
Amazing. And I mean, I think we're all very used to seeing the grand kitchens at Hampton
Yes.
Court. This is slightly smaller in scale, isn't it?
It absolutely is, but no less work would have happened in this room than at grand palaces like Hampton Court. In fact, it probably would have been just as bustling, if not more so, because there would have been fewer people doing all the work, and it would have been just to service the local family who were living here, or of course the guests.
Absolutely. So I'm noting that there's a lot of stone in here,
Yes,
as well as a bit of
absolutely.
woodwork, but
Mhm.
this doesn't feel like the wooden house that we've been occupying, does it?
Yes, it's very much a move away from that 15th century original building, isn't it? And of course, the stone works better than wood when you're handling, grand fireplaces and lots of heat.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure also would have been a safety virtue as well.
Exactly. We've got a few wonderful features in this fireplace, haven't we?
We really do.
Including those tasty looking pies in the bread oven.
I was just going to say, there's a bread oven here.
It's a bread
and
oven.
Now these were a luxury in the 16th century. You
Completely.
generally have a communal bakehouse.
Exactly.
So to have your own bread ovens really meant you were something in the world, didn't it?
Which totally tracks with what we know about the 16th century occupants, particularly the Saxby family, who we've mentioned, having quite a lot of wealth and being willing to splash the cash on their lifestyle.
Amazing. And I think I'm right in saying that you'd essentially have built a fire in that space, raked out the embers, and then put your bread in, sealing it up with this door here.
Yes, this is the door here.
Amazing.
It's really quite special, and it's almost quite witchy, the feeling in here, isn't it, with all the cauldrons and the fireplace. But it's a wonderful space, and it is making me rather peckish as well.
It is, and I'm assuming. So we got a wonderful cauldron here. I'm imagining broths and pottages and things like that being boiled here. But I'm assuming these hooks here are your temperature control.
Definitely. I mean, the meat obviously would have been the most expensive part of the meal, but we know that a family like the Saxbys would have been able to afford it. How would this have regulated temperature?
So essentially, I'm assuming you would move the thing hanging from it, be it a pot or meat, closer or further away from the fire.
Just like turning up the gas or turning it down.
It's just amazing. These are very familiar concepts.
Exactly.
They're just arrived at in a different way, aren't they?
Totally. This is actually quite a modern space in terms of what we can relate to today in kitchens, can't we?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm not sure how quickly I would get on cooking a feast in here, but everything's there, isn't it?
It is.
And I think with a bit of sort of training and practice,
You'd be able
to
cook us up a roast.
Totally. I'm wondering, how would you get the pies out of the oven? But I'm noticing something over there, which looks very much like a pizza slice.
I was going to say, it looks like a wood-fired pizza. You'd scooch it under and pull out the hot bread or the hot pizza. And I think definitely these are the kinds of tools that would have been absolutely typical for a kitchen like this at this time.
Nothing changes, does it?
Nothing changes. So we hope you all enjoyed this little tour of the beautiful Anne of Cleves house here in Lewes.
You can visit this exquisite East Sussex gem for yourself. All of the information is listed in the comments below.
And if you enjoyed this content, there's far more of it to enjoy at the Tudor Trio Patreon. Thank you so much to everyone here at Anne of Cleves House for allowing us to show you a snapshot of this beautiful property.